The voicemail began with my daughter crying through a contraction. Then her husband said, "Claire is in labor and medicated. Do not call her. Use the signature from the insurance file. Send the money to our joint account. And finish before her father gets back." 8 days later, that recording played inside a dealership conference room while Evan faced the woman whose car he had sold. He had spent years calling me a retired shuttle driver who saw fraud in every form. He did not know why I recognized the missing title stamp, why the dealership preserved his call, or what his final voicemail revealed about the life he planned once Claire came home without transportation. A ratification waited before her. One signature could protect her husband or confirm he had taken her freedom while she gave birth. If you held that pen, would you save the marriage or expose the transaction? Tell me below. And subscribe for stories where one preserved voice returns a stolen choice. The blue Subaru was the last large decision my daughter made with her mother. June had already lost her hair when she and Claire visited 3 dealerships in one afternoon. Claire wanted something reliable for winter roads and large enough for the family she hoped to have. June rejected the first 2 cars because the rear doors felt too narrow for a child seat. "You should never have to turn sideways to protect your own baby," she said. They chose a 2020 Outback with a pale gray interior. Claire paid the loan from her salary as a speech therapist. June contributed only the first insurance premium and a small brass key ring shaped like a compass. After June died, the car became less a memorial than proof that Claire could make a careful choice and carry it forward. The title was in Claire's name alone. I was Ray Hollis, 67, a widower in Lexington, Kentucky. My knees hurt after long drives, and the first joints of my hands had begun to thicken. 3 days a week, I drove a shuttle between the public library branches and senior housing complexes. Evan called me the book bus chauffeur, though the van carried people, not books. Before retirement, I spent 28 years with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet's Vehicle Investigations Unit. I began checking altered titles in courthouse basements and ended supervising dealer compliance cases across 3 regions. My work involved cloned identification numbers, forged releases, coerced transfers, odometerfraud, and families who discovered ownership only after it vanished. I rarely discussed that history. June had lived through years of dinner, interrupted by calls from county clerks and frightened buyers. When I retired, I put my old manuals in a metal file cabinet and chose quieter work. Claire knew I had investigated vehicle fraud, but Evan believed I had been a licensing clerk with an inflated memory. He preferred that version. Evan Barrett sold home renovation packages on commission. He dressed well, remembered birthdays, and knew how to turn urgency into a favor. When he and Claire married 4 years earlier, he treated my caution like a personality flaw. Ray sees a forged signature in every napkin. He once told friends, "I laughed with them because Claire was happy." Small things changed after she became pregnant. Evan began driving the Subaru even though he owned a pickup. He kept both key fobs so Claire wouldn't lose one. He moved her paycheck into a joint account for efficiency and complained whenever she visited me without checking their calendar. Claire called it nesting. I called it a pattern only inside my head. Her pregnancy was difficult near the end. High blood pressure put her on reduced hours. Maternity leave cut her income. Evan said he would handle bills until she returned to work, and Claire allowed him to manage the joint account. She still kept the Subaru title in a fireproof pouch beneath the linen shelf. 3 details would later matter. First, Claire's signature on the title had a long upward stroke in the H of Hollis, the same way she signed every school form before marriage. Second, Kentucky titles require a properly completed transfer and notarized signatures. A spouse does not gain ownership merely through marriage. Third, Commonwealth Auto Plaza recorded every incoming sales and appraisal call after an automated notice. The recordings were retained for compliance because the dealership had once paid heavily for accepting a coerced sale. I knew about that policy because I had helped write the state bulletin that inspired it. 2 weeks before Claire's due date, I installed the infant seat base behind the passenger seat. Evan watched from the garage doorway. "You know stores do that for free," he said. "I know. Then why spend an hour measuring? Because free and correct are different questions. He rolled his eyes. Claire smiled at me, but she looked tired. While checking the tether, I found a folded appraisal sheet under the driver's seat. Commonwealth Auto Plaza had valued the Subaru at $24,800. The customer name read Evan Barrett. "Why is your husband appraising your car?" I asked. Claire frowned. "We talked about maybe getting something bigger. Did you authorize him to sell it?" "No, just research." Evan entered before I could ask more. "Rye, we are having a baby." Not opening a case file. He took the appraisal from my hand and tore it once down the middle. Decision closed. Claire asked me to leave it alone. I did. Though I wrote the dealership name and appraisal date on the back of an old shuttle schedule. At 2:17 the following Tuesday morning, Claire called. Her water had broken. Evan was driving her to Sanicaria. Agnes Medical Center. I grabbed the hospital bag she had left at my house and followed. By noon, she had been admitted, medicated, and placed under close monitoring. The Subaru remained in the hospital garage with the infant seat waiting in back. Atunushase. Evan said he needed to retrieve Claire's charger. He took her keys and disappeared for 93 minutes. When he returned, the brass compass keyring was no longer in his hand. Claire's labor lasted 18 hours. There was no dramatic moment when we understood what Evan had done. There were monitors, ice chips, nurses moving quietly, and his repeated trips into the hallway to answer calls. Atre patruzech. I went to the garage for the infant blanket June had sewn. The Subaru's space was empty. I checked the level twice before calling Evan. "Where is Claire's car?" "Handled." "What does that mean?" "It means I made a financial decision for my family." I returned to the room. Claire was breathing through another contraction, one hand gripping the bed rail. Evan stood by the window. "Did you sell the Subaru?" I asked. Claire opened her eyes. Evan's face hardened. "Not now." "Answer her." "I traded an aging car before it lost value." For what Claire asked, "We will talk after the baby comes." The nurse looked between us and asked whether Claire wanted anyone to leave. Evan stepped to her bedside before she could answer. "Your dad is creating stress," he said. "Focus on Lucas." They had chosen the name months earlier. Claire looked at me. Fear and pain narrowed her world to the next minute. "Dad, please." I left because she asked. Not because Evan was right. Lucas was born shortly after 7 that evening. He had June's small chin and a serious crease between his eyebrows. For 1 hour, every other fact moved to the edge of the room. Then Evan posted a photograph announcing that mother and baby were safe. In the picture, his hand covered Claire's. Beneath it, someone commented, "Big moves for the Barrett family. Congrats on clearing the old ride." The account belonged to a salesperson at Commonwealth Auto Plaza. I took a screenshot. The next morning, Claire asked for the car keys so I could bring the infant seat upstairs for inspection. Evan placed one key on the tray. It belonged to his pickup. "The Subaru is gone," he said. "We got $22,000 after fees." Claire asked. "It went into the joint account." "I didn't sign anything." "You signed a limited power of attorney with the insurance forms." Claire turned toward me. "Did I? I cannot know what you signed." Evan opened a folder on his phone and showed her a one-page document. The signature looked like Claire's, but the H in Hollis bent downward. The notary block carried a stamp from a county 2 hours away. "I have never been to Mercer County," Claire said. "It was remote notarization." Evan replied, "You agreed when we talked about upgrading. Researching is not selling." He bent close to her. "You are exhausted. Do not let your father turn postpartum confusion into an accusation." The sentence was carefully built. If she remembered differently, her body became the explanation. I asked Claire one question. "Do you want me to verify whether the dealership has completed the title?" Evan answered first. "No." Claire looked at him. Then at Lucas, sleeping against her chest. "Just verify." She whispered, "Do not accuse anyone." That limit became my authority. I called Commonwealth Auto Plaza from the family lounge. A title clerk named Marisol Vega found the transaction, but would not discuss private details with me. The titled owner is my daughter. I said, then she must authorize disclosure. Correct. Her insistence reassured me. Claire joined by video, verified her identity, and stated that she had not signed the title, power of attorney, or sale agreement. Marisol stopped typing. Mrs. Barrett. Our system shows the vehicle was picked up from St. Agnes yesterday. An electronic payment was issued to an account bearing both spouses' names. The title review is not final. Who spoke with your buyer? Your husband. Did anyone speak with me? Marisol hesitated. A woman briefly confirmed your birth date. Claire's face changed. I was in active labor. Marisol placed the transaction on a fraud hold. She said compliance would preserve calls, documents, camera footage, and payment records. Then she asked Claire to send a written statement from a secure email. Evan entered the lounge while she was dictating it. Hang up, he said. Claire covered the microphone. They have a recording. For the first time since the missing parking space, Evan looked afraid. He reached for Claire's phone, but she pulled it against her chest. The movement was small, yet it was the first possession she had physically refused to let him manage. Commonwealth Auto Plaza did not send the recording immediately. Its compliance manager, Deirdre Shaw, required Claire's written dispute, proof of identity, and a secure release process. She also notified the bank that the electronic payment was contested. Procedure felt slow inside a hospital room, but speed had been Evan's weapon. By afternoon, Claire received a protected link containing 3 calls. The first was an appraisal inquiry from 2 weeks earlier. Evan said, "The car is my wife's, but I manage the assets. She is pregnant and doesn't want to deal with paperwork." The buyer told him Claire would need to participate or provide valid authority. The second call occurred at 1248 on the day of labor. Claire's cries and a nurse's instructions could be heard in the background. She is in labor and medicated. Evan said, "Do not call her. Use the signature from the insurance PDF. Route the money to our joint account and finish before her father gets back." The buyer warned that a copied signature was insufficient. Evan replied that he had a notarized limited power of attorney and that Claire had authorized him to answer identity questions. Then a woman joined the call for 22 seconds. She gave Claire's birth date and address. The voice belonged to Evan's mother. Patricia. Claire stopped the recording. She was at the hospital yesterday. Patricia had brought coffee at noon and left before delivery. She had not been in the room during the call. The third recording was a voicemail left after Marisol placed the hold. Evan said, "My wife is emotional after delivery. Her father used to work around vehicle paperwork and is making this bigger than it is. Do not contact Claire until Monday. By then she'll be home and I can get the confirmation signed." The transaction was no longer one rush decision. It was a plan to use childbirth, medication, and isolation as a window. Deirdre explained the supporting records. The power of attorney had been uploaded from Evan's email. Its notary number belonged to a commission that had expired the previous year. The title signature had been copied from an insurance document down to a faint scan line beneath Claire's name. Pickup lane footage showed Evan handing over both Subaru keys and accepting a tablet from the buyer. The dealership had issued $22,000 to the joint account before final title review. Deirdre froze resale of the Subaru and began the process to recall the payment because some funds had already moved. The bank opened its own review. Claire checked the account. $19,500 had been transferred to an entity called Fieldstone Resolution. I recognized neither the company nor the bank reference. Evan said it was a debt consolidation service. Claire had never heard of it. With her permission, we called the bank's fraud department. Fieldstone Resolution was a payment processor used by several online wagering and private credit platforms. Bank statements from the previous 6 months showed smaller transfers Claire had mistaken for home renovation expenses. How much, he asked Evan. This is not the time. How much? He looked at me instead of her. 41,000. Claire stared at Lucas Bassinet. You sold my car for gambling debt. I protected our credit. You used my labor to do it. He lowered his voice. Keep saying things like that, and the nurses will think you are unstable. The hospital's social worker had entered quietly behind him. Her name was Tessa Green. Mrs. Barrett, she said. Would you like to speak without your husband present? Evan laughed. This is a financial argument, not domestic violence. Tessa did not argue about labels. Claire decides who remains in the room. Claire looked at him for a long time. Leave. He did not move until hospital security appeared at the door. After he left, Claire shook so hard that Tessa took Lucas while I held a cup of water to my daughter's lips. I defended him. Claire said, I let him control the accounts. Permission to help is not permission to forge. What if he takes Lucas? Tessa explained that financial abuse did not automatically decide custody, and that Claire did not need to make every marital decision before discharge. She could create a safety plan, name approved visitors, secure documents, and consult independent counsel. Claire asked Deirdre to keep the car on hold and preserve everything. She did not yet ask police to arrest Evan or the dealership to accuse him publicly. She wanted one night to hear her own thoughts without his voice explaining them. At 10:31, Evan left another voicemail for the dealership. The system preserved it under the same transaction number, turning what he expected to vanish into a dated sequence. This time, he revealed what the sale was meant to buy beyond payment of debt. Deirdre sent the fourth voicemail the next morning. Evan sounded angry. Claire cannot discharge herself with a newborn and no car. Once she is home, I'll handle her phone and get the confirmation. If you reverse the sale now, her father will take her and the baby. Hold the deal until Monday. The sentence removed the last charitable interpretation. The missing car was not only money, it was leverage over where Claire could go after discharge. Tessa helped Claire make a written hospital safety plan. Evan was removed from the approved visitor list. Patricia called repeatedly, saying a wife should not punish her husband during the most important week of their lives. Claire listened to one message and blocked the number. Then she asked me to take her and Lucas home. Your house or mine, I asked. Yours for 3 nights. After that, I decide. I agreed. Her precision mattered. She was not exchanging one man's control for another's. An attorney named Lila Moreno met with Claire by secure video. Lila advised her not to sign a ratification, not to withdraw the dealership dispute, and not to enter the joint account except to preserve statements. She explained that the car transaction, banktransfers, forged document, and marital separation were related but legally distinct. The voicemail is powerful, Lila said, but we still verify the documents, payment path, and who participated. I appreciated her caution. Claire asked whether Evan could claim she had verbally authorized the sale. He can claim it, Lila said. The recordings, copie signature, expired notary, timing, and your immediate dispute will be evaluated together. Evan began sending messages through mutual friends. First, he panicked over debt and made one bad decision. Second, Ray had manipulated a medicated woman. Third, the Subaru was marital property regardless of the title. Each message moved responsibility farther from the forged page. I wanted to answer. Lila told us not to litigate by text. Claire created a secure folder, saved every message, and gave access to counsel. That evening, I opened the metal file cabinet in my basement. Inside were training bulletins from my old investigations unit. One described a case in which a husband sold his wife's van during hospitalization, then used her lack of transportation to force her into his parents' home. I had supervised that case. The wife recovered her van. She also told me, months later, that every official had focused on the forged title while ignoring what the missing vehicle did to her choices. That lesson had become the coercive transfer bulletin sent to every licensed dealer in the region. It recommended direct owner contact, recorded authorization, independent identity questions, and a hold whenever hospitalization, disability, or family pressure appeared. Commonwealth Auto Plaza had adopted the policy after a lawsuit years later. I had not told Claire how closely her case echoed the bulletin. I feared that my certainty would become another pressure she had to resist. At breakfast, she found me reading it. "You have seen this before," she said. "The pattern, not your ending." "What did the other woman do?" "That is her story." "What do you think I should do?" I closed the file. "I think your car should remain yours unless you choose otherwise. I think the documents should be investigated. I do not get to decide your marriage or Lucas's relationship with his father." Claire stared at the brass compass keyring. Deirdre had recovered it from the Subaru and sealed it with the keys. "Mom chose that car because she wanted me to turn without asking permission." I remember. "Then help me get the truth into one room." Commonwealth Auto Plaza scheduled a transaction review meeting for the following Friday. 8 days after Lucas's birth, Claire's doctor cleared her for the short trip if she avoided strain. A trusted friend stayed with Lucas nearby, and Tessa arranged a private room if Claire needed to rest. Evan was invited because he had initiated the sale. Patricia insisted on attending as the voice used in the identity call. The dealership's general manager, Titel Gulerk, compliance manager, outside counsel, and bank investigator would be present. The purpose was not a criminal trial. It was to determine whether the dealership would rescind the purchase, how to correct the title file, and what referrals were required. The night before, Evan emailed Claire a prepared ratification. "Sign this and we all go home," he wrote. She printed it and placed it beside June's compass key. "No," she said. "Evan came to my house before the dealership meeting. He stood on the porch holding a new infant carrier as though a purchase could restore his role. Claire needs to come home," he said. "She decides that you have been waiting 4 years to break us. You sold her car while she was in labor. I solved a debt problem." With a forged document, his eyes narrowed. "You know enough paperwork to frighten her, but you have no authority anymore." That part was true. Then the records should not worry you. He stepped closer. "If she refuses to ratify, the bank investigates the joint account. Her paychecks funded it. Her name is on everything. She could lose her professional license if this looks like fraud." Claire was a speech therapist, not a banker. Her license would not vanish because her husband forged a title. Evan used official-sounding consequences, the way some men use locked doors. "Tell her yourself at the meeting," I said. "I am telling you so you can be useful for once." The porch camera recorded openly. He saw it and lowered his voice. "Once the car is gone, she cannot take that baby anywhere without me. That is what families are supposed to be dependent." He left the carrier on the steps. I did not treat the statement as the whole case. I sent the recording to Lila, who preserved it and decided when it could be used. At the dealership, Evan arrived in a tailored jacket with Patricia and a lawyer who introduced himself as family counsel. Claire entered through a separate door with Lila. She moved slowly, one hand against her abdomen, but she carried the ratification herself. Commonwealth's general manager, Omar Bennett, opened the meeting. "No one is required to sign anything today. We will review the transaction record and allow each party to respond." Evan placed his copy of the power of attorney on the table. "My wife authorized the sale before labor. Her father exploited postpartum stress to reverse it." Claire spoke before Lila. "I did not sign that document. Authorize my mother-in-law to impersonate me, or consent to the sale." Patricia pressed a tissue to her mouth. "I never impersonated you." Evan said the buyer only needed family confirmation. "You gave my birth date and address while I was in labor." To help, Omar asked Marisol to explain the title review. The copied signature, expired notary commission, and owner contact failure had triggered the hold. The buyer who accepted the documents had been removed from transactions, pending retraining and investigation. Evan's lawyer objected that internal policy did not prove forgery. "Correct," said Dealership Counsel. "That is why we preserved the original records and referred the disputed document for examination." Lila placed a one-page hospital timeline beside the power of attorney. Claire had authorized the hospital to release only the times needed to test Evan's claim. Adzicie obsprezicie. A nurse documented active labor. Adzicie dozić shishase. Claire received medication and handed her phone to me because she could no longer answer messages. A 2 Two nurses documented an extended contraction and a medication check. A 2 The dealership system logged Evan's call, saying the owner had approved the sale. Omar asked Evan when Claire supposedly gave that approval, around 12:45. Verbally. Claire met his eyes. Who was in the room? He named no one. He said she had whispered it. Tessa Green. Attending as the hospital's records, custodian and social worker, confirmed that 2 nurses were present during that interval. Both had documented Claire asking why Evan kept leaving the room. Neither heard her discuss a vehicle, a power of attorney. Ora sale. Evan's lawyer said silence in a medical chart proved nothing. It proves the timestamp he chose deserves comparison with the other evidence. Lila replied. Claire pointed to the printed signature. He says I signed before labor. He also says I approved it during labor. Which story am I being asked to ratify? Evan glanced at his lawyer. The paperwork expressed what we had already decided as a family. We did not decide it. She said, you decided I would be easier to control after the contraction started. The bank investigator traced the $22,000 payment. $19,500 went to Fieldstone Resolution. Fieldstone's return identified 3 wagering accounts, controlled by Evan and a private loan in his name. None belonged to Claire. Evan leaned toward her. I did it to protect our mortgage. You never told me the mortgage was at risk. Because stress raises your blood pressure, so you use my health to remove my choice. He looked around the table for someone to rescue his explanation. No one did. Then Deirdre placed a small speaker in the center of the table. Mrs. Barrett has authorized playback of the dealership calls concerning her transaction. Evan reached for the ratification. There is no need if she signs. Claire slid the paper away from him. Play them. The first call established the plan before labor. Evan described Claire as unwilling to handle paperwork and asked how quickly a spouse could sell a separately titled vehicle. The second carried her cries in the background. No one at the table moved when his recorded voice said, do not call her. Use the signature from the insurance file. Patricia's 22-second appearance followed. On the recording, she gave Claire's personal information and said, yes, she wants Evan to handle it. In the conference room, Patricia whispered, I thought she did. Claire did not raise her voice. You did not ask me. The third voicemail blamed postpartum emotion and instructed the dealership not to contact Claire until Evan could obtain confirmation. The fourth exposed the purpose. Claire cannot discharge herself with a newborn and no car. Once she is home, I'll handle her phone and get the confirmation. Evan's attorney asked to pause. Claire said, no. He left the message. I am entitled to hear it. Deirdre finished the playback. The dealership's records then filled the gaps. Pickup video showed Evan surrendering both key fobs. Document metadata showed the power of attorney originated from his laptop. A forensic examiner's preliminary report found Claire's title signature had been lifted from an insurance PDF, including the scan artifact. The notary denied performing the act and provided proof that his commission had expired. Deirdre enlarged the 2 signatures on the wall screen. On Claire's insurance form. The tail of the H crossed a faint gray line left by the scanner. The power of attorney carried that same gray line in the same place, even though it appeared on clean white paper. Her current signature rose at the end. The pasted one stopped exactly where the old image had been cropped. Marisol added the contact log. Evan had rejected a verification text to Claire's number, then supplied a different number as her temporary hospital line. That number belonged to Patricia. When the system routed, the owner called back to the number already on file. Evan left the first voicemail, telling the dealership not to disturb his wife. The pickup footage had its own timestamp. Evan loaded Claire's emergency bag, the infant seat base, and both Subaru keys into Patricia's SUV before delivering the car. He had not merely noticed an unused vehicle and made a rushed choice. He had removed the things Claire would need to leave the hospital with Lucas, then carried out the sale. Patricia admitted Evan had called from the hospital cafeteria and told her Claire had already agreed. She had not heard Claire grant permission. He said the buyer would cancel unless I confirmed the address. She said, "And when you heard me screaming," Claire asked. Patricia looked down. "I told myself you would understand later. That is what both of you keep calling consent." The bank investigator confirmed that Evan's debt, not a family mortgage, received the proceeds. "What was your plan for discharge?" Claire asked. Evan spread his hands. "Mom would take you home. You were not supposed to drive for weeks." "Home where?" He hesitated. Patricia answered for him. "My house." "Just until you recovered." Claire's expression hardened. No one had packed her clothes for Patricia's house. No one had discussed moving Lucas there. Evan had sold the one vehicle fitted with the infant seat base and expected exhaustion to make the rest feel inevitable. "And after I recovered," she asked, "we would decide whether you still needed a car?" Evan said, "There it was without paperwork or code." He believed her mobility was a privilege he could review. Evan turned to me. "This entire circus exists because Ray cannot accept that his daughter has a husband. I had spoken only to identify dates and the brass key. Nothing in your voicemail came from me." I said, "You trained her to distrust every financial decision." Omar Bennett studied my face. "Ray Hollis." Evan laughed. "Yes." "The retired shuttle driver." Omar stood. "Mr. Hollis supervised the vehicle investigations team that wrote the protected transfer bulletin our dealership adopted. The recording and owner contact safeguards in this case exist because his unit documented how vehicles are used in family coercion." The room changed, but I kept my hands flat on the table. "I am retired." I said, "I have no authority over this dealership, the bank, or my daughter. My history explains why I recognize the warning signs. It does not prove this transaction. The calls, documents, payment records, and witnesses do that." That distinction mattered. Evan had believed discrediting me would erase the system around him. Instead, the system preserved his own words. Dealership Counsel announced Commonwealth's decision. The purchase would be rescinded for failure of valid owner authorization. The Subaru would remain secured until the title correction and payment recovery steps were documented. Commonwealth would absorb temporary loss rather than resell a disputed vehicle. Records would be referred to the appropriate dealer licensing, banking, and law enforcement channels. No one declared Evan guilty of a crime in that room. The evidence would enter proper processes. Omar placed the sealed Subaru keys and brass compass ring in front of Claire. "Before we release the vehicle, we need your decision on the ratification." Evan pushed his chair back. "Claire, think about Lucas. If you sign, this becomes a misunderstanding. If you refuse, lawyers spend our son's first year tearing us apart." She looked at the signature line, then she tore the ratification once, slowly, from top to bottom. Lucas's first lesson will not be that love makes forgery private. She signed a sworn dispute statement instead. She authorized release of the records to investigators, revoked every financial permission she had previously given Evan, and directed that all communication go through Lila. Then Claire completed the dealership's restricted release instruction in her own handwriting. The vehicle could be released only to her or to a person she named after the title hold cleared. No spouse, parent, or relative could substitute a telephone confirmation. She initialed each line. Lila slid forward 3 more documents. Claire signed notice that she disputed the transfer from the joint account, requested preservation of Evan's device records, and withdrew the old emergency contact authorization that had allowed him to speak for her at medical offices. She paused before the last page. "This one is not a custody order." Lila said, "It records where you and Lucas will stay tonight and asks that all requests for contact be made through counsel until a court sets temporary terms." Claire read every line. Evan told her she was embarrassing him. Patricia said a baby needed both sides of the family. I said nothing. Claire signed, "I am not choosing Dad over you." She told Evan, "I am choosing the right to make decisions you stole from me." Evan stood, "You are taking my son?" "I am leaving a meeting." Claire said, "Custody will be handled lawfully. You do not get to turn every boundary into an abduction." He reached for the keys. Omar moved them beyond his hand. And dealership security stepped closer. Patricia began crying. "Please do not keep us from the baby." Claire faced her. "For now. You will not visit without my written agreement. You helped use my labor as cover. An apology is not enough." She did not promise permanent separation. She did not offer immediate forgiveness. She chose distance, counsel, and time. Outside the conference room, Evan tried one last time. "You cannot drive in your condition." Claire looked at me. "Dad, will you drive today?" "Yes. Only today." "Only today?" She placed the brass compass key ring in my palm, not as surrender, but as a temporary, clearly named choice. Commonwealth returned the Subaru 12 days later. The dealership replaced the locks because Evan had surrendered both fobs and could have copied one. It detailed the interior, reinstalled the infant seat base under Claire's supervision, and provided written confirmation that the purchase had been rescinded. The $22,000 payment took longer to recover. The bank returned part of it from Fieldstone's processor reserve. The remainder became part of civil claims involving Evan, the wagering accounts, and the joint account. Claire froze her credit and moved her salary to a new account. Investigators treated each issue separately. The forged power of attorney and title signature were examined. The recorded identity call was reviewed. The fund transfer and Evan's statements were documented. He was not dragged away from the dealership in handcuffs, and no single voicemail replaced due process. Consequences still arrived. Evan's employer placed him on leave after learning he had used a client document template to create the false power of attorney. The state licensing board opened a review because his work involved consumer contracts. He entered a treatment program for gambling only after his attorney advised it, which made Claire question whether he wanted recovery or mitigation. She filed for legal separation. Her temporary family court order allowed Evan supervised visits with Lucas twice a week. Patricia was not approved as supervisor. Claire did not oppose father-son contact. She opposed access without accountability. Evan sent letters saying the sale had been a desperate act to protect the family from debt. Claire answered once through Lila. Full financial disclosure. Independent gambling treatment. No direct access to my accounts. Phone. God. Or medical information. 6 months of consistent compliance before I consider any conversation about the marriage. Maybe 6 months would become a year. Maybe separation would become divorce. Claire refused to make the future payment for his present apology. Our relationship changed too. For the first month, I drove Claire and Lucas to appointments. I kept the Subaru keys in a bowl by the door and asked every time before using them if she said she wanted to drive. I did not inspect her reason. One morning, she found my old protected transfer bulletin on the kitchen table. "You knew exactly what Evan was doing," she said. "I recognized the pattern. Why didn't you tell me everything at the hospital?" "Because you had just given birth, and I was afraid my certainty would become another order." "You could have said, 'I have seen this before.'" "Yes." She waited. "I should have." Protecting choice includes giving someone information without attaching a command. I had been so determined not to replace Evan's control with mine that I withheld context. Claire was entitled to hear. We practiced a new sentence. "Here is what I know. What do you want to do with it?" Sometimes she asked for my opinion. Sometimes she did not. 3 months after Lucas was born, Claire returned to work 2 days a week. She drove the Subaru herself. The first morning, I stood in the driveway while she tightened the infant seat straps. "You can stop checking," she said. "I am standing. You are inspecting with your eyebrows." I laughed and stepped back. She clipped June's brass compass to the keyring. The metal was scratched from the evidence bag, but the needle still moved. "Mom said I should never have to turn sideways to protect my baby." She was talking about a car door. She usually meant more than one thing. Claire did not rebuild trust with Patricia quickly. After 4 months, she allowed one supervised visit in a family center. Patricia apologized without explaining Evan's pressure. Claire listened and set another date rather than offering forgiveness. Evan's progress was less clear. He completed treatment, disclosed additional debt, and admitted that selling the Subaru was meant to keep Claire dependent after discharge. That admission came through Counsel, not in a romantic letter. It was the first statement she considered honest. She still did not move home. Commonwealth Auto Plaza used the case in staff training with all names removed. The buyer who ignored the red flags returned only after retraining and supervision. Marisol received a commendation for stopping the title before resale and preserving the calls. Omar invited me to speak at a dealer compliance workshop. I declined the stage but sent a written note. A vehicle is not only property, sometimes it is the distance between permission and escape. 6 months after the birth, Claire drove Lucas to his pediatric appointment. I followed in my old pickup because we planned lunch afterward. At the first intersection, she turned left while my navigation suggested right. My hand rose toward the horn from habit. Then I lowered it. She knew where she was going. At the clinic, Claire handed me the Subaru keys while she lifted Lucas from his seat. Hold these. Until when? Until I finished buckling him into the stroller. The boundary lasted 20 seconds. She took the keys back, placed herself behind the wheel, and chose the road home. The dealership's voicemail had preserved Evan's plan, but a recording did not rescue my daughter. It gave her information that others had tried to withhold. Claire used it to reclaim her title, her money, her movement, and the right to decide what happened next. That was the difference between evidence and control. Evidence opens a door. It does not push someone through. If someone used a vulnerable moment to make a financial decision for you, what proof and boundary would you demand before trust could return? Share your answer. And subscribe for more stories where dignity begins when people recover the right to choose their own direction.